The navigation buoys are moving upstream. Lena Brooks has guided towboats through the lower Mississippi for 19 years, and she knows that red lights do not leave the channel. Yet 3 of them are drifting against the current, low and silent, directly toward her lead barge. Then one of the lights blinks. Lena pulls the throttles back. Thousands of tons of grain keep moving, even after the engines slow, pushing the tow toward a sandbar. The nearest shape rises from the brown water. Small ears rotate above a head broad enough to resemble a boulder. Its mouth opens, not to bite through steel, but to expose a set of tusks that could tear through a fiberglass boat and the person inside it. The animal charges. Lena turns away. The barges miss the Hippo, but the outside unit slides onto the sandbar. River traffic stops behind her while the animal sinks beneath the surface and disappears. Nothing supernatural attacked the tow. Nothing had to. A territorial animal in the wrong channel forced one bad decision. And on the Mississippi, one bad decision can close a highway used by an entire continent. This is what would happen if hippopotamuses invaded America's greatest river. The idea sounds absurd because America once considered doing it on purpose. In 1910, Louisiana Congressman Robert Broussard introduced H.R. 23,261. The proposal would have funded the importation of useful foreign animals into the United States. Hippos became its most unforgettable symbol. Supporters imagined that they could eat invasive water hyacinth in southern waterways and become a new source of meat during a period of high food prices. Newspapers discussed lake cow, as if the bayous were empty ranch land waiting for livestock. The proposal never became law. There is no credible evidence that a secret herd from the bill survived in Louisiana for a century. But the fact that Congress seriously heard the idea reveals how easily an animal can be reduced to 2 promises. It will eat a problem, and then we will eat it. A real invasion would begin through a far smaller mistake. Imagine a private wildlife ranch near a Louisiana tributary, holding a handful of hippos behind steel fencing. A major hurricane floods the property, tears open the perimeter, and connects the enclosure to miles of bayou. Most of the missing animals are found. 2 females and 1 male are not. Officials assume animals that large cannot remain hidden. They are wrong. A hippo can spend daylight hours mostly submerged, exposing little more than its eyes, ears, and nostrils. The Atchafalaya Basin offers backwaters, flooded forest, abandoned channels, dense vegetation, and long distances from heavily traveled roads. The animals emerge after dark to graze, then return to water before sunrise. For the first months, they are not an invasion. They are a rumor. Fishermen report wide tracks ending at the water. A hunter finds grass cropped along a bank but sees no cattle. Trail cameras record only wet shapes at the edge of the frame. One deputy suggests an unusually large feral hog. Another blames damage on alligators. The reports remain disconnected until a female is filmed entering a bayou with a calf behind her. That calf changes everything. Escape has become reproduction. Hippos are not river monsters engineered to attack humans. They are large, mostly grazing mammals that depend on water for refuge and temperature control. But their calm appearance is deceptive. They defend space at close range, especially around groups, calves, and preferred water. In Africa, boats and people moving between a hippo and deeper water can trigger violent encounters. On the Mississippi system, the animal would meet people who have no instinct for reading its warnings. A local alligator may sink away when a fishing boat approaches. A hippo may hold its position. It may yawn, lift its head, splash, or rush forward. An angler who mistakes those signals for curiosity could discover the difference only after the outboard motor stalls. The first fatalities would probably not come from attacks on steel barges. They would come from smaller mistakes: a kayak entering a narrow backwater, a night fisherman cutting between a mother and her calf, a camper standing on a feeding trail, or a driver striking a dark animal crossing a levee road. Adult hippos are massive, but their danger is often exaggerated in the wrong ways. Their teeth can inflict catastrophic wounds, yet they cannot pierce the steel plating of a commercial towboat. They would not snap a 15,000-ton barge in half. The industrial threat comes from navigation. The Mississippi is controlled motion. Towboat pilots work with current, channel depth, bends, weather, other vessels, and the delayed response of barges lashed together into long formations. A bull occupying a narrow harbor entrance does not need to damage the tow. It only needs to surface where the pilot cannot safely continue. Engines reverse, barges drift. Another tow waits. A lock approach closes, while wildlife officers attempt to move an animal they cannot see beneath muddy water. The river carries an enormous share of the grain headed to American export elevators. Even a brief closure during harvest can produce a chain of delays. Loaded barges wait upstream, elevators lose space, trucks idle, freight costs rise, and farmers receive weaker bids. The hippos would not destroy the national economy. They would become a new source of uncertainty in a system where hours, water levels, and channel access already matter. Lena's grounded tow becomes the first incident impossible to dismiss. Sonar records several large bodies near the bend. Drone footage shows a bull surfacing between anchored barges. The Coast Guard establishes a temporary safety zone. Within a day, the clip appears on every major platform. The country reacts exactly as the animals need it to. Sightseers drive south hoping to film them. Boat owners crowd the closed channel. Influencers throw fruit from docks. A restaurant prints Lake Cow Country shirts before authorities have counted the herd. Every feeding video teaches the hippos that boats and people predict food. Meanwhile, the animals are changing the quieter water around them. Hippos feed mainly on land at night and return to water, carrying nutrients and organic matter from grasslands into rivers and pools through their waste. In their native ecosystems, that transfer is part of a long ecological relationship. At high densities in confined pools, however, waste can consume dissolved oxygen as it decomposes. Research in Africa's Mara River has documented hypoxic events and fish kills associated with heavy hippo loading. The main current of the Mississippi is vast and constantly moving. A few hippos could not turn it into a dead zone. The vulnerable places would be warm, slow backwaters, oxbow lakes, marinas, and bayous where many animals gather and flushing is weak. There, repeated waste input could help drive oxygen down, especially during hot weather. Fish rise, gasping at the surface. Crawfish traps come up nearly empty. Residents blame chemical pollution until water samples reveal a different pattern. High organic loading concentrated around resting pools. The animals have not poisoned the water. They have overwhelmed small pockets of it. Their bodies would also reshape shorelines, but not in the cinematic way rumors describe. A few hippos would not excavate through federal levees and flood cities. They could, however, create repeated entry paths, trample marsh vegetation, widen muddy banks, and damage low agricultural berms or restoration sites. Each path becomes a small erosion channel during high water. Multiply that damage across a growing population, and local land managers inherit another expensive problem. Native wildlife would respond unevenly. Alligators rule many southern waters through ambush, but an adult hippo is too large for them to treat as normal prey. Large alligators might take newborn calves near the edge of a group, while defensive adults could injure or kill alligators that approached too closely. Most encounters would end in avoidance. The river would separate into overlapping danger zones, alligators controlling cover near shore, hippos controlling favored pools and access points. Feral hogs would compete with hippos on land less directly than people expect. Both can exploit disturbed landscapes, but hippos are specialized grazers rather than giant pigs that eat anything. Deer and livestock could lose access to heavily used banks. Ground-nesting birds might suffer where feeding paths flatten vegetation. In other places, hippo-created openings could attract fish and birds. An introduced mega-herbivore would not produce one simple effect. It would rearrange hundreds of relationships that evolved without it. The greatest natural limit would be winter. Louisiana's climate could provide long, warm seasons, abundant water and grass. Farther north, the invasion becomes less certain. Hippos are not built for prolonged freezing conditions. River ice, cold air, reduced forage, and rapid temperature drops would punish animals attempting to establish permanent groups in Missouri or Illinois. Industrial warm water discharges and deep, unfrozen channels might offer temporary refuges, but they would not magically give a tropical mammal cold tolerance. A severe winter could kill animals trapped beyond the climatic boundary. Instead of marching steadily toward Minnesota, the population would likely expand through the lower river, its tributaries, floodplains, and Gulf Coast wetlands, with occasional individuals wandering north during warm months. Climate would draw a line. Human infrastructure would blur it. Power facilities, drainage canals, reservoirs, agricultural fields, and maintained rights-of-way could create stepping stones between suitable habitats. During floods, waterways that appear separate on a map connect. A young male pushed out of a crowded group might travel through those temporary corridors and emerge far from the known population. That is how agencies lose control of an invasion. Not because the animal is invisible, but because the landscape briefly becomes larger than the search. Wildlife officials face three choices, and none is clean. Relocation sounds humane. It is also dangerous, expensive, and temporary unless every breeding animal is found. Chemical immobilization around deep water risks an animal becoming unconscious and drowning. Moving several tons of agitated wildlife requires specialized equipment, veterinarians, secure transport, and a destination willing to accept it. Sterilization may slow future growth, but leaves dangerous adults on the river for decades. If births already exceed the number of animals treated each year, the population continues expanding. Colombia's experience with introduced hippos demonstrates how quickly a small founding group can become a long-term political and ecological crisis when management lags behind reproduction. Lethal removal is biologically direct and socially explosive. Images of calves beside dead adults would provoke outrage. Some residents would see the animals as victims of human negligence. Businesses profiting from hippo tourism would demand protection. Others, pilots, fishermen, farmers, and families living along narrow bayous, would demand immediate removal. The argument would stop being about biology. It would become a referendum on what Americans believe nature should look like. Lena is asked to testify at a public meeting after the grounding. Behind her, one screen shows delayed grain traffic. Another shows a calf resting its chin on its mother's back. Both images are true. Together, they make agreement nearly impossible. She tells the room that the animal did not attack her toe. She turns to avoid it. That distinction matters because it strips away the myth. The hippo does not need hatred, strategy, or a desire to conquer. Its ordinary behavior is enough to create extraordinary consequences in a river built around human expectations. While the meeting continues, enforcement teams search the original basin. They locate several adults and fit tracking devices to 2 females. The maps reveal a pattern. The known groups are using predictable grazing areas and daytime pools. Containment still appears possible. Then one collar stops moving. Officers find it on a muddy bank, torn free, not by the animal, but by a person. Nearby tire tracks lead toward a private boat ramp. Someone has decided that saving the hippos matters more than the control program. Days later, a drone records 3 animals in a tributary outside the containment zone. One is a female no agency has cataloged. A calf surfaces beside her. The invasion enters its second generation before the country finishes arguing about the first. From that point forward, eradication becomes less likely with every flood season. Groups spread through connected waterways. Farmers reinforce fences. Small marinas install warning lights. Tow operators share live sightings. Towns build viewing platforms and emergency plans at the same time, profiting from a danger they cannot admit they want to keep. The Mississippi does not become a river of constant attacks. That version is too simple. Most days, the hippos remain out of sight. Barges pass, fishers return home, grain moves south. But every routine now contains a new question. Is the dark shape beside the boat a log? Is the broken fence the work of hogs? Is the empty backwater suffering from heat, runoff, or dozens of bodies resting beneath its surface? Has the young male seen upstream returned south, or found a warm refuge no one is monitoring? The most disturbing part of the invasion is not that hippos would become masters of the Mississippi. Winter, current, disease, limited forage, and human control would all push back. Many animals would die. Some populations would fail. The disturbing part is that they would not need the whole river. They would need a chain of warm backwaters, enough grass, a few safe breeding pools, and enough public conflict to delay decisive action. Between those pockets, floods and tributaries would do the rest. More than a century after Congress imagined turning hippos into American livestock, the country would confront the opposite problem. An animal that no one owns, no one can ignore, and no one agrees how to remove. One evening, Lena guides another tow past the bend where she grounded. The channel has been cleared. The tracking map shows no animals nearby. On the bank, tourists wait behind a new fence, cameras pointed toward the fading light. Nothing moves. Then 3 red navigation lights seem to drift away from the shore. Would you remove every hippo before the population spreads, or allow a controlled group to remain as part of the new Mississippi? Tell us which risk you would accept in the comments. Subscribe to What If Animals and watch the next invasion, because sometimes the most dangerous creatures in a river are the ones people cannot agree to let go.